Hello Ibra Army and welcome back to another IBRACORP video. Thanks for coming in and checking out the channel today. It's a pleasure to have you back as usual. And we just want to thank you for your patience for the past couple of weeks. Been taking some time off, time to myself, time for the team to take some time off as well. And just getting away from the screen for a little bit and doing some other things to help manage a little bit of burnout. It's been very busy in our personal lives as well as here on the channel, and trying to balance everything with what people want to see can get a bit overwhelming sometimes. So it's good to take a break and recalibrate a little bit, which is what I did. Started to get into flying drones, so that's something that we'll be incorporating into the channel just as part of B-roll footage or anything like that. Otherwise, we'll be setting up a separate channel just for that kind of stuff. If you're interested in that, let us know. I'd be curious to know whether you guys would be interested in some FPV drone footage or flying a drone or how to fly a drone or anything like that. We're still learning here as well, so it'd be pretty cool to experience that together, I think. If you guys are interested, let us know in the comments. But the topic of today's video, guys, is to finally hit the nail on the head for the last video in the series for the TrueNAS killer. Now, in our last episode, in part 3, we set up our TrueNAS Scale virtual machine. We showed you how to set up the shares and how to get access to them when we want to use them. Now, with that VM running, it's now running and working perfectly fine. Basically, our last step is to set up some sort of operating system that will basically manage our media server. There's a few ways you can do this, and by all means, guys, again, I'll just need to reiterate that there is no right or wrong way, in my opinion and in our opinion at IBRACORP, to do this. So you may look at our method and you might think, okay, maybe I'll tune this or I'll change that. That's perfectly fine. I mean, there's many ways to do this. So what we're going to show you today, the method we're going to show you, is installing on a Ubuntu 20 virtual machine, having Docker Compose running on there. We'll set up our share from TrueNAS Scale, and I'll just show you a couple of apps basically to get you started. Probably Plex, I think, would be a good one to show you guys, just to make sure that things like hardware transcoding is working, etc. The alternative to that, if you know what you're doing, is you can go with a LXC container as well. If that's something you want to do, go ahead. Basically, with an LXC container, you wouldn't really call it a virtual machine, it's the container, and it uses resources on the host rather than virtualized into a virtual machine. So, if you want to think of the methodology of Docker containers, it's somewhere along those lines, but it's not like a Docker container. It's an operating system, it's a Linux container, so it's an operating system containerized, sharing the resources off the host directly. So that's a method that we can show you as well, and we actually already know how to do it. We've already got it written up, but we just want to separate stuff out a little bit so it doesn't become too overwhelming for our audience. So what we might do for you guys is launch that as a separate video. It'll be a nice short one because all the setup inside of the container is going to be the same as what we're going to show you today in the virtual machine. It's just the initial part of setting up the container. So with that said, guys, why don't we just get stuck into it and get our Ubuntu virtual machine running so that we can finally realize why we set up all this TrueNAS stuff in the first place. So without further ado, let's get stuck into it. Alright guys, so here we are, we're on our Proxmox server now, and we're going to go ahead and get this up and running. So at the moment I have a few things running. We've got our Unraid virtual machine running there. We've got AdGuard running as well. Here's our current virtual machine running Plex and all the media automation, things like that. And I've got a separate server just testing with at the moment. So there's nothing really happening there. What we're going to do is create a new VM so that you guys can see it from start to finish. The first things first, let's create a VM. So click on create VM and obviously give it a name that suits you and the VM ID that suits you as well. I'm going to call this one IBRANENU just for the purpose of the video. We don't need to tick anything else here if you don't want to. However, I would recommend if you want to set it startup and boot and the start and shutdown order. So I think, let's say you have a completely fresh setup here. You would probably maybe want this server to start up second, third, fourth, etc. The first one that should always be the one to start up is the TrueNAS Scale. I've just changed the name there to IBRANENU Ubuntu. You can also set up startup delay, which we've explained in the previous episodes of this series, so you can go through that if you want to. We'll click next. It then asks for our ISO image, which we've already downloaded. Again, we've covered this as well in the previous videos. So go ahead and select the ISO there, click next. For the system, we don't need to change anything, just leave that as is for now. Click next. Now in the previous video, I showed you guys how to link the storage shares to Proxmox from our TrueNAS Scale install. So theoretically, you should have that storage in here now that links back to your IBRANES virtual machine or to your TrueNAS virtual machine. Now, the reason why we do that is the disk for the virtual machine will then live on TrueNAS Scale and will be protected by our ZFS array. So that way you have the full protection and benefits of the speed and reliability of ZFS by running the virtual machine there. The disk lives there. Alternatively, if you wanted to, you can store the virtual disk on your host machine. If you think that's a safer idea, by all means, you can do that too. I've swapped between the two to try different things out, but either way, it'll work fine. In our scenario, we've gone with IBRANES VMs. We've got the local LVM and the V disks there. I'm going to go with IBRANES VMs. That lives on TrueNAS Scale. The disk size should be plenty, but I'm going to go with 40 gig just to be safe. Now with the cache, what we do is set that to write through, and you can also enable the SSD emulation as well, since it is technically running on an SSD with our setup. You don't need to do that. You can uncheck it if you like as well, but that will help just speed up a couple of things here and there. Once you've done that, go ahead and click next. And now we assign the CPU. So depending how many resources you want to give it what you think it needs. In my scenario here, I've got the 20 Intel cores that I can use. So we can say I want to give it maybe 12 cores, for example, just to start off with. And the type, go down and select host. So right down the bottom here, we've got host, and that shares the CPU directly in. Now this is going to be really important when we go to use video transcoding for things like Plex. Everything else we don't need to touch. Go ahead and click next. With the memory, assign whatever memory, again, you think you might need. I have enough RAM to spare, so I'm going to give it 32 gigs of RAM. If you don't have 32 gigs of RAM, give it the highest amount you possibly can without bogging your system down, and just enough to get the VM going and getting it running. So 32 gig might seem a bit extreme, so you don't need to do that. We'll uncheck the ballooning device and we'll click next. For the network device, it should just be your default bridge if you haven't set anything else up, so go ahead and select that as well. In a future video, we'll be showing you pfSense going through this, and things like bridges and that will change, so that will come later. But for right now, just leave it as is. Go ahead and click next again. So when you're done, you should have something that looks a little like this. We've got the balloon 0, 12 cores, we've got our 32 gig of memory, our name, our firewall, all that looks pretty good. Once you're done, go ahead and click finish. So now give that a second, and what it's going to do is create the virtual disk, and it's going to be creating it on our ZFS array because that's the location we selected, which is this location right here, as you can see. Now that it's loaded, we're ready to start, so go ahead and select start. Then go into the console, and we'll wait for that to start up so we can start setting up the Ubuntu server. Okay, and as you can see, we're on the installation wizard for Ubuntu. So basically at this point, we just follow through the prompts. Go ahead and click the language that you want. We're going to go with English. We're going to select continue without updating. We'll handle updates later. The language for our keyboard. And here we have our static IP address selection if you want it to be static. Currently by default, it's DHCP. We don't really want that. We do want it to be static. So what I'm going to do is select that, go to edit IPv4, drop it down here from DHCP by hitting enter, select manual, and then we can start filling this out. So just fill it out as I'm about to show you now if you have similar subnet. Okay, so you should have something similar to this. Now my subnet here is on 192.168.1.1. So the subnet at the top is 192.168.10/24. Our address is, I just picked the address that it did already assign to it, but I'm going to make it static doing this. So 154 is the one we selected. We've got our gateway there, and I've also added the Google DNS servers. I just like to manually add DNS servers to servers, and that means that if there's anything wrong with the main router upstream, it knows how to resolve domain names on its own. So if you're happy with that, click save, and you'll see static is now set at the top. So go down, hit enter, done, done. Under here, we will uncheck set this up as a LVM group, hit done. and then it'll give you that page there summarizing the space used. Click done. Do we want to continue? Yes. Now complete the next page with your name, the name of the server itself that you want it to be. So this will be important when you want to reach it through your network. So set it to something that's simple. I probably wouldn't even put a hyphen in there if I had to, but just for the purpose of the video, we'll use that. Our username, password, and then go ahead and click done. We don't use Ubuntu Advantage, so you can just skip that. We want to definitely install OpenSSH server, so hit enter or spacebar to select that. If you have an identity, you can import it. Otherwise, just go ahead and click done. I don't use anything from the Snap Store. I don't know if you guys do. I absolutely can't stand the Snap Store and Snap apps, so I don't even bother doing that. Just click done. And now we just sit back and wait for the installation to complete, and I'll show you the next step. All right, guys, so once that runs through, then it's going to ask us to reboot. Now, it's going to be interesting because it expects you to unmount the installation disk. So what we need to do is hit enter to reboot and just give it a moment. On this page, we hit enter and then we hit escape, and now it takes us into the BIOS. Now, while it's in the BIOS, we can close this. We can then go ahead and stop the VM. Do now. Head over to hardware, highlight the CD drive and click edit, and then go to do not use any media. So go ahead and click OK. And that just removes the installation disk for us now. Now we're also going to pass through another device. Okay, so what we need to do is go to hardware, click add, click on PCI device. And here's where you want to add, for example, if you have an NVIDIA GPU, you can go ahead and do that. Alternatively, if you have a CPU that has built-in integrated graphics, then you want to select that. And that is going to allow Plex to pick that up and use it. So under device here, we've got Comet Lake UHD graphics 630. So that's our graphics from our Intel chip. Select that, check all functions, and that's it. Don't select anything else. Go ahead and click add. Once you're happy with that, go ahead and click start. Okay, now with the server started, we've gone into our SSH terminal, which we use Termius, which I've gone over before. And now we're logged in through this rather than using the console in Proxmox. I just find this a lot easier to use. And you can use a lot of the functionality like copy and paste a lot easier. So on first startup, we don't really have much that we need to do here, which is fine. What we want to do is probably update first and foremost. So let's go ahead and do that. First, what I'll do is switch into sudo mode. And now I'm running as root, so we can then go ahead and update it. So we've got sudo apt-get update -yqq. That just silences a lot of the output basically. And same thing goes again, we will do the upgrade after it. Keep in mind it also answers yes to the prompt without having you do it. So if you're not wanting to actually upgrade, you just want to see what's going to be upgraded, don't put the parameters on the end. Okay, so that's done. We've now updated to the latest version. More than likely there's going to be a requirement to reboot. But before we do that, we're going to also install the guest agent. So let me just clear this. And then we paste in this command. So we've got apt-get install QEMU guest agent, hit enter. And that's going to allow Proxmox to communicate with the virtual machine a lot better, and also allows us to see a lot of the settings we need to see. What we'll do is say sudo shutdown. Now we'll come back to Proxmox. So go to options, and in here you'll see the QEMU guest agent. Click edit, select to use it, and run the guest trim after move or migration, and click OK. Now, once the virtual machine shuts down and reboots, the guest agent will then be enabled. So anytime you see this orange text, it means that it's pending a restart of the machine, or for the machine to be stopped and then started, or the changes to be applied. They'll then turn white just like the rest of them. So go ahead and start it up, and you can see that now it's turned white, so it has enabled it. Now we'll know if the guest agent is working if you go to summary and just wait for it to start. This should change from guest agent not running to basically showing our IP address and all of our networking. So let's just give that a second. And there it is. So now we have our guest agent working. That's going to be a lot better when we want to send commands to and from the machine. So definitely make sure you always install the guest agent, no matter what type of operating system you're going with. There are some exceptions, of course, but always do your research first and just check. But for the most part, any major OS that you're using will have the guest agent tools available, so you can get them installed. So let's hit reconnect here, and it should take us straight back, and here we are, and it's looking pretty good. Now, probably one of the first things we want to do is set up our share, so we can just have that ready to go, ready from the start, and linking back to our TrueNAS Scale virtual machine. Now, there's a few ways to do this. We can run a command that will mount it immediately for us, but that doesn't necessarily mean it will start on boot. So what we want to do is have a mount that automatically attaches as soon as the virtual machine starts, so that anything else that follows after, in our case Docker Compose or any other Docker containers, the location already exists and is ready to go. Otherwise, you're going to have problems with containers saying that the location does not exist. So to do that, we're going to edit the fstab file. I recommend you back this up before you make any changes, just to cover your own back, but it's pretty straightforward. It's basically go to sudo nano /etc/fstab, if I can type today. Go ahead and hit enter. It's going to ask for your sudo password, and then it's going to bring you into the fstab file, which is what we're looking at here. So what I'm going to do is dump what you should be putting in order to connect to your server. Just grab that here, and we pop that in. So as you can see, I just put a comment here, obviously, just so we're aware what it's doing, and I'll break down what's happening here. So we have // then the address of our TrueNAS Scale server, followed by the share that we've created. Now, for comparison, I'll bring over TrueNAS Scale so you guys can see. So if we go to shares, we have a share here called media. Okay, now in terms of the pool reference, that's the path that it looks at, pool 1, pool 2. That's not how the SMB shares are shown on the other end. Now, at this point, I'm gonna quickly talk about SMB versus NFS. We have a lot of people come in, they comment about why we're using SMB, we could be using NFS, we get better performance, things like that. There is no right or wrong answer because it really depends on your environment and what you're trying to achieve. Now, one of the common arguments that's made is, well, you know, I've got this computer, this server sitting somewhere else and I want to get maximum speed. I want to get, you know, gigabit speeds and things like that, 10 gigabits or whatnot. Keep in mind, guys, if you're going to be pumping out through a network connection, you're not going to get that speed. Just straight up not going to get that speed. However, built in to the same machine itself, and it's talking to itself, we can accomplish pretty high speeds. So SMB, if you do have a hybrid of Windows and Linux environment, then I recommend you go with SMB shares. If you're going to go with straight Linux, Unix environment, you don't use any Windows whatsoever, you have no need for SMB whatsoever, then my answer would be I'd recommend going NFS shares. The process is exactly the same. Just really depends on how you want to run things yourself. So yeah, please don't consider this the one and only way to do it. We're just using SMB shares for our environment and what we use. So again, we'll just go back to what we were saying before. Media is the name of this share. So if we go back to our fstab file, we're going to go to TrueNAS Scale /media. What do we want it to be mapped to on this virtual machine, this Ubuntu server? I've said I want you to live in MNT/media. Simple as that. Protocol is going to be using CIFS. The user, so user equals the username we created. This is the user and password in TrueNAS Scale. So that's something we have explained to you in the TrueNAS Scale episode. So watch episode 3 if you haven't already to figure that part out. In here now, I'll just take out that full stop. Not sure why that's there. Then it's a comma, pass equals, then the password. So you use the password for this user in TrueNAS Scale. The UID is 1000, the GID is 1000. Now, this is demonstrated in TrueNAS Scale. And if we just go back to it, and we go to our local user, here's our user, his UID is 1000. And if we go to local groups, the GID is also 1000. Now this is going to be really important, guys. I recommend that you try and make sure that this is left at 1000 for this link. Things like Sonar, Radar, basically any kind of Docker container that uses the PIDs, will be looking to match the user who has the right permissions to be able to read and write from that location. So having 1000 for the user in your virtual machine, matching the GID and PID of the user here in TrueNAS is really important. If it's not 1000, that's fine, but you have to make sure they match. Try your best to make them match. By default, it's always 1000. So by default, you shouldn't have to change anything really. This user should already have 1000 in both, and then back in the virtual machine, your user should be 1000 as well. Then we have comma no perm and then a 0 0 space 0 space 0. Once you're done with that, go ahead and write it out and then exit. So Control O, hit enter, then Control X to exit. Now we do need to install the CIFS utils package. So what we do is enter this command. So sudo apt-get install CIFS-utils, hit enter, hit Y to install it, and let that run through. So now let's reboot again, and hopefully our mount should show up. So now when I go to that location, MNT media, and I type in ls, we can now finally see all of our locations inside of it. And we've also set up our hard linking there as well. So if you followed our hard linking videos for Unraid, you can see how we've replicated that same setup here on our ZFS array. So if I go to CD media in this folder, go ls, we've got our movies, a whole bunch of other stuff as well. So now we have a location mapped. It's going straight to our ZFS array. The share lives on the server and it will be attached on startup. Fantastic. So now we have somewhere where media can be mapped to. So when we start working with our containers, it's easy to map them out for ourselves. Now at this point with this brand new VM that we set up, there's not going to be anything different between this and our existing server. So I'm going to swap to that one because I already have the compose files there to show you guys. And it'll be a lot easier to walk through that with you on there. So let's do that. Okay, so here we are on our main server Romulus for our media. And basically now that we have everything set up, we've set up our share location, we've set up our guests, we've updated our virtual machine to the latest. We now have a nice clean slate to work on. So what I would actually recommend before you go any further now is take a backup using Proxmox. So in Proxmox, head back there, highlight the virtual machine, go to backups, and just click backup now. Take a backup now. Once that backup is done, highlight it and click change protection. And what that's going to do is make sure that regardless of your backup routine, which we've gone through this in the previous episodes, that particular backup won't be removed. So it's a good idea to do that with your first initial backup so that you have a clean slate that you can always go back to should anything go awry. It's going to be a lot easier for you to recover a backup than to try and sit there figuring things out a lot of the time, believe me. So once you've backed everything up, jump back into the server and continue. So we've done that now. We're ready to go with some containers. So I don't know how much you guys know about Docker Compose. It's definitely something that we're going to be compiling as part of our new series coming very soon, which is going to help you from start to finish in terms of understanding the whole concept of installing apps, getting them up and running with Compose, and really how easy it is. Once you guys start using Compose, your whole life will change because you will never have to remember Docker run commands or anything like that. You can take those files anywhere and just relaunch them again on another server without having to do anything manually. It's fantastic. Now, what you're looking at here is something that we've been working in like secret little squirrels over the past few months, mainly disk duck, if I'm being honest. And this is our IBRAMENU installer. Now, this helps us out because we are constantly deploying and redeploying servers all the time. So this menu gives us an easy way to install stuff that we really need to get up and running quickly. And one of those items is Docker Compose. Now, if I just go to the basic steps here, we've got the update upgrade. We can install Docker and Docker Compose. Now, our menu will do that for us automatically. You will obviously won't have that just yet. We're looking at something in that in the future. But in the meantime, you can follow through the Docker instructions on their guides. It's pretty straightforward. Start with Docker, then install Docker Compose, and then you will have those two items installed. The next thing I recommend you do is create a custom Docker network. Okay, so if you don't know how to do that manually, I'll show you right now. So in your terminal, just type in Docker network create and then the name of the network that you want. So let's say proxy free. Once you've done that, you're pretty much ready to go with actually installing items of interest. So what I would do first of all is go to the opt folder. So here's the opt folder. We'll go ls and you can see here's all my folders that I have for containers that I'm running. So probably one of the first is, let's say Plex. We'll go cd Plex, ls, and here we have our Docker Compose file in there, and as well as the actual app data for Plex. So if I just go to sudo nano and I say Docker Compose YML, and you go through the file, this is what a Docker Compose file looks like. As you can see, it's got all the information we need for our setup specifically and can easily take that elsewhere. So one of the first things we'll see here is our PG ID and PU ID. So as you can see, they're set to 1000. That's perfectly fine. We've got our ports there, that we might want to open as well. This is all mostly default, by the way, guys. So from Linux Server IO, for example, we grabbed this Docker Compose template and most of it was already here. You know, there might have been a few changes here and there. One important one here is devices. So this allows us to map our CPU to Plex so that it can use hardware transcoding. So definitely make sure that's there. The volumes, just to explain how this works. The left-hand side is anything on the host machine. You're then mapping that to inside the container, which is on the right-hand side of any of these parameters. So for example, in here, we're saying map the location /MNT on our Ubuntu VM to /MNT inside the container. So another probably good example that you guys would want to see is our Docker Compose for Authelia, for example. Now, typically, if you're just using Docker run commands, guys, you have to remember all of this information and re-enter it whenever you want to run those containers again. With Docker Compose, we don't really have to worry about that. We've got the ability to launch multiple containers. We can give them different names and we can have them mapping to all sorts of special locations. Now, don't worry, I've already changed these passwords. These are just placeholders, so don't stress about that. But this gives you the whole package. If you have things that are dependent on other things, they can all be included in the one Compose file. You just take this text file, guys, this YML file, and you just launch it again somewhere else if that's what you want to do. So that makes it superbly easy to get things up and running. Now, if you guys are interested and wanting a Docker Compose tutorial, if you want us to just go through that specific, I think personally it would actually be a good idea. So I think we might end up doing that. And if you guys want to see that, let us know. I'll be happy to do it for you. I'm by no means a Compose expert, but we have a lot of experts in our community Discord. So feel free to join there too for any help you might need. So essentially what you want to do is get these containers up and running. You want to start them up, make sure that they're working. Start with something as simple as Plex and just check that you can get to it locally. Then you can start, adding something like traffic, which we have all the Compose files for on our docs page. So docs.ibracorp.io. So we've given you a lot of these Compose files for a lot of the ones you're looking for. And if you're missing any that you want, be sure to join the Discord and just see if someone else has it. We'll be more than happy to share it. It's pretty straightforward. Now, there are a couple of other steps I'm going to show you in terms of getting Plex to make sure that works for you as best as possible for your hardware transcoding. So what we want to do first is add either the root account or the user that you're going to be using to host the apps to the video group. So we go sudo usermod -a-g video root. Now root is the username. So we can go with root. We can also add psychotic since he's the other user here. We add them both to that video group. Now, if I type in this command and we hit enter, which is lsla, and then it gives us the device driver, we can see render D128 is there. So that means our CPU is showing up as a video transcoder. But what we want to do is change the permission. So if I just paste in chmod 777 for that dev dry location, which is really important when we're using Plex in a container. And ironically, I forgot to put sudo on it. So that's done there. So now if we do it again, we can see the permissions have changed from this over to this. All right, and that like I said, is really important when it comes to Plex wanting to use that when it's in a container. And now for inside the container, there is one particular step that we'll do. It's optional, but I would recommend it as well for you guys. So in here, type in docker exec plex apt get and then y update, for example. Then we're going to paste this command, which installs our i965 driver. And then we will just simply restart Plex and allow that to restart. That updates the driver so that it can get to the files outside of the container. That's a couple of extra tuning tips there that will help you get the best out of your Plex server as well. So guys, pretty much once you've got the Docker Compose stuff done, depending on what apps you want to set up the way you want them, the actual Ubuntu virtual machine that we have now and is connected to TrueNAS Scale is done. It's working, it's connected to our share, and then in things like Sonar, for example, which I'll show you maybe that as our one last thing here. So here we are in Sonar, for example, and once you first start this up, you obviously have to set your root location. So the root folder, as you can see, is MNT Media, Media, TV. Now that's how I've set it up on mine. You just have to map it to basically wherever you mapped your CIFS share or your TrueNAS Scale share to. We go to add folder and I go to MNT. That's our folder there that we're talking about. I've got TV and I've got TV 4K, which is why I have two folders. So that should help you again figure out where to add this for your apps, especially for your media automation. Now, if you want the absolute best performance, you would use something like a feeder and have all of this automation stuff on a separate server. And all that does is the collection and transmission of data and puts it in your storage location. And then you have a separate server that is literally just for Plex and reads, you know, to play Plex content. But that's the next step, and you would need an actual separate machine if you wanted to not use the resources off the same server host. Alright guys, well that's pretty much it for our IBRANES series for the moment. We will revisit it in future based on your feedback and questions that might come up after the series has finished. I really want to thank you guys for supporting us through this year and through these projects we've been trying out to try and bring you some new content, things that are different, things that aren't the same spelled out everywhere else on YouTube and across the world. So we hope this helps you find something new. If you haven't already, we really encourage you to help support our work by visiting our website and signing up as a member. You can log in with Discord to it, and it's automatically going to give you a role in Discord showing you as a supporter. And we really hope and we really thank you for those who are supporting us and we really want to take a moment to thank all of those who are supporting us already as members. We really appreciate you. Thank you very much. And we have some surprises in store for you for the future. We're looking at some merchandise stuff that will basically be part of our packages for when you donate as a member and become a ongoing member. Then you'll get some freebies or, you know, things like that. So we're open to ideas. We also have a new version of our website coming very soon with some important upgrades, just like feature requests and content requests. So keep an eye out on that because it'll be a big change to our service to you. But in the meantime, like I said, please consider liking and subscribing and donating if you do have a spare dollar or two to help us keep going and doing what we're doing. We really appreciate you guys. We hope you enjoyed this series. It's been very taxing. A lot of work has gone into it. And obviously it's not always going to be the most popular videos on our channel, but that's okay because people were interested in it and that's why we did it. So we hope you enjoyed that, guys, and we'll see you in the next IBRACORP video.